Welcome to the Financial Coaches Podcast, where we talk about how to build your practice from startup to scale up while being the kind of coach your clients crave. Finally, a podcast for financial coaches. Here are your hosts, Maria Casillas and Cody Sizemore.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Financial Coaches Podcast. I'm Maria Casillas, normally joined here by my illustrious co-host, Cody Sizemore, but today, unfortunately, I do not have him with me. So I'm sorry that we're not going to get to have an awesome conversation per se, but I do hope that what I have for you today brings you some immense value and that you can take this and actually start implementing it right away with your clients. So guys, I don't know if you know this or not. You probably have. I believe I've alluded to it on the podcast before, but I teach a personal finance class for young preteens. So we're talking like, I think the youngest one is maybe 10, but actually I think they're 11. So 11, 12, 13, and 14 are kind of the age range that I'm working with right now. And it's really interesting because it's fun to see like what sorts of things kids are already aware of and maybe sometimes what their parents have taught them. But I think a lot of it is just kind of innate things or things that they're observing on their own. And so today we actually had a new student join, and I wasn't going to actually be willing to do that, but her parent bugged me and I said, fine, I'll let her join, even though we're kind of 7 weeks into the 16-week process. And long story short, because this was a new kid, I wanted some of the other kids to kind of share with her, not just a little bit about themselves, but what's something that they have learned over the last several weeks so that it could kind of catch the student up as much as possible. And I think the reason I want to share this with you is because I think I'm so fascinated with what their responses were. There were 3 that were kind of the mainstream, and the first one I'm sure is not going to surprise you. The first couple had said payday. Payday is their favorite part of the class. Now, in case you're wondering, like, what do you mean payday? I actually have a portion built into this class where I have set up them to receive a payday every other week so that they can kind of understand what does maybe a corporate job look like where they get paid on a regular basis, or if they have their own business and they set up to have owner's comp every couple weeks or on a consistent basis. So I want to be able to practice with them. And so that's why we have paydays built in. So not surprisingly, a couple of them said, yep, payday is my favorite part of the class. But what was a little bit surprising to me was what a few of the others had pointed out as their favorite thing or the thing that they wanted to share with this new student. And the first one that was different than payday is that there were different types of budgets. And I thought that was really interesting because I think that when we are working with clients, it can be so easy to just fall into the trap of, here's the way I did it, or here's the way that I think is the best way to do it. And we really only present our clients with that one option. And I'm just begging you to not do that. If that's something that you're working on or that you're doing right now, I would encourage you to work on finding some alternatives, at least to offer your clients. Because what was so cool about this is they were recognizing that there were different ways to approach a similar problem. And since each one of them is unique, then having a unique approach was helpful to them. So I thought even at the young age of 11, 12, 13 years old, they're picking up on the nuances and saying that they actually really appreciate that. And then the second one that they said that was different than payday, which also I think maybe gave me a little bit of hope for this next generation, is that they were really interested in understanding their values and how spending to their values is something that something they want to be more aware of and more intentional with. And so I thought, well, that's actually pretty cool that these young kids are going to that even before saying payday, because only 2 of the kids said payday. And so that was really neat. And I just wanted to encourage you that, there are cool things out there. And these young kids did not get those impressions from their parents. Some of those things weren't necessarily innate. The idea of recognizing your values, understanding them, and then creating good money habits around those values is something that they've definitely learned in class, and that they're appreciating it. So just wanted to share that because I'm coming right off of doing that class and before hitting record today. So it's kind of fresh on my mind and wanted to share that with you. The other thing we talked about today, I'm actually going to jump into, only I'll probably get into a little bit different detail with you than I did with the kids today. But the generalized thing that we talked about was the ABC method, which is basically cognitive understanding of the way that things happen. So ABC, just as a generalized overview, you've heard me talk about this before, so this might be review for you. But if you're tuning in for the first time today, maybe grab a pen and paper. Maybe this will be something that's new and you can start implementing right away. But in this scenario, A stands for activating event, B is a belief, and then C is a consequence. Now, one of the things that we did talk about with the kids today is that an activating event can be either internal or external. So something that happens outside in the world, a circumstance that we have zero control over. It could be something that we actually do to ourselves. So internal, external. And then a belief can be rational or irrational. And then finally, a consequence can be positive or negative. So we wanted to be able to just kind of understand the framework of this because we need to know that there are different outcomes, and sometimes they're positive and sometimes they're negative. Sometimes they're emotional, sometimes they're behavioral. But either way, they oftentimes stem from having some sort of activating event, which we are aware of, and then usually an underlying belief, which oftentimes we're not super aware of. So today, just for the next couple minutes, I want to focus on the B section, which is beliefs. And this is where I'm going a little bit deeper with you than I did with them today. But I think that with the beliefs, I want to focus specifically on irrational ones. With rational beliefs, there's really not a whole lot to say. It's like, okay, they actually make sense for us. They're productive for us. We don't really need to change those. But the irrational beliefs, those are something that are probably not serving us super well. And so I want to make sure we talk about those, because if it's not serving us, it's not serving our clients. And then we want to make sure that we're able to help them identify some of those beliefs and maybe even combat them a little bit. We want to make sure that they have an opportunity to dispute those beliefs and maybe replace them with some better ones. So let's, without further ado, talk about a few of the ones that I see come up over and over again. Now, there are a lot of limiting or irrational beliefs that are out there, especially around money. And today we're going to talk about the ones that are specifically around money. But I'm not going to go through all of them because I don't want to bore you with just a giant list. But I'm going to talk about some of the ones that are pretty common, and maybe you'll even go, oh yeah, I recognize that. And some of them are subtle enough where you might not recognize it right away, but if you take notes on these, you could probably see them in some of the other statements that your clients make, or maybe even some of the things that they do, and you can kind of backtrack and try to figure where those beliefs are. So one of them is, I'll never have enough money. Now, this one's pretty common. We say it to ourselves. You guys have heard of the idea of getting a raise and then spending that plus 10%. There's this understanding that if I just had more money, things would be easier. But then when we get more money, we tend to spend more money unless we've actually figured out why we're doing that. And part of that is because we have this irrational underlying belief that we'll never have enough money. So if we believe that, then even when we get, quote, enough money, we have to get rid of it, right? We have to get rid of that money because we have to feed that belief that we'll never have enough. So that's where some of that subtlety comes in, but that's one example of where you might see this with your clientele. Another one is that money is hard to get. Granted, sometimes we need to work hard for our money, but if we're constantly telling ourselves that money is hard to get, then when we see opportunities that maybe make it a little bit easier, we might subconsciously just ignore those opportunities, or the way some people do, find every excuse why that won't work because it has to be hard to get. If it's too good to be true, it must not be true, right? We've heard that before. And there is some protective belief or utility around that belief. But at the same time, we could be using it to our detriment. So I just want to let you know that one. Money is hard to get. Another one is more money means more problems. Now, I know I've said that before. I know I've heard that before. These are some beliefs that, if not disputed, can really start to change the way that we behave with our money. So more money equals more problems. If you really believe that and you're trying to avoid problems, then chances are you're also going to naturally avoid money. How about there isn't enough money to go around? Now, this is something that we hear oftentimes, even just like in the political arena, we'll hear it socially, that, oh, there's not enough money to go around. And that's why we have, people who don't have, and we have people who have too much. It's almost as if there's this zero sum game, and that, if I take from over here and give to over here, that's the equal amount. That's not really how money works. And if we continue to hang on to that irrational belief, or our clients hang on to that irrational belief, then they're not going to want to amass any more money, because they'll feel guilty about that, because they believe that there's not enough to go around. In that same vein, there are two other scripts that are very, very common, and they're definitely related, like little cousins to the one that I just mentioned. And that is that having money is selfish, and therefore wanting money is greedy. So you can see how those are related to the last one about there not being enough to go around. And so if the first one is true, that there's not enough money to go around, then it would bear to reason that wanting it would be greedy and having it would be selfish. But once we dispute that one about there not being enough money to go around, then it's a little bit easier to tackle the other ones and recognize that it's not greedy to want to have money, because money actually can be a useful tool for many things. And having money isn't selfish. Money itself has no moral value to it, and having it doesn't make us a selfish person. In fact, many things that you can do with that money will indicate whether or not you're selfish, because it'll show what your values are based on how you're spending, investing, and saving that money. So that's another one that's related. Two more that I want to talk about. One of them is that you can't change your financial future. Now, this is something that I think comes, from childhood. I mean, it could come from anywhere, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But wherever it comes from, this particular idea, it just renders you helpless, and you are a victim of circumstance at this point. And so why try? Like, if you can't change your future, your financial future, then what control do you have over your decisions, and what effect is it going to have? And so this is a very disempowering belief that we sometimes have. And I think sometimes it's actually an excuse for not making different choices. If we believe truly, or even subconsciously, that we cannot change our financial future, that everything is kind of just written in the sand for us and we have no control, then that kind of takes away our culpability in any of the decisions that we make. But the thing about that is that it also takes away any of the pride, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word I'm looking for, but it takes away any of the empowerment that we have when we do make those good decisions. So I've always told my clients, always, and I encourage you to do the same thing, to let them know at the beginning, you do not take responsibility for the poor choices that they choose to make with their money. And the flip side of that, because I think most people actually do say that, but the flip side of that is that you're not the one who gets to take credit when they make good choices and the consequences are positive. And that, when we do that, when we give that power back to our clients, it's the most empowering thing that we can do. It might be hard. It might mean that the choices that they make will turn into circumstances that they're not excited about, or consequences that, maybe they would have not liked to experience. But that's sometimes how we learn. We learn from our consequences, and then we do something differently. We see a different consequence and we go, oh, yeah, I kind of like that thing better. And so I'm going to continue to do more of the thing that caused B rather than the thing that caused A. So just remember, you can't change your financial future is one of the most disempowering beliefs that your clients can have. So when we talk at the end of this, how we can try to combat some of those, I would, if they're thinking this one, you guys, I would highly suggest that you help them combat that one. Okay, and then finally, this is one of the favorite ones that I wanted to bring up because you've heard Cody and I talk about many, many times about values and how they can and should even dictate how we behave with our money. And at the top of the episode, I mentioned that a couple of the students actually mentioned values as being the thing that they were most excited about learning in this particular class. And so I think maybe that's why I am drawn to this particular script as one that I want you guys to hear. But it says, if I have too much money, I'll lose my values. I'm going to say that one more time because I think this is one of those things, especially if you've been working with your clients and you've been doing the things that Cody and I have talked about, and you've actually been helping people do value audits and you've helped them to see how their spending can encourage or no, that's not the right word, how they can align with their values, then this is actually really important because if they might be more aware of their values at this point. And if they are aware of those and they have the script saying, if I have too much money, I'll lose my values, then they're actually going to, again, consciously or subconsciously repel money. Like they're not going to want to go for those raises. They're not going to want to invest and make money on the side. They're not going to want to create new sources of income because they're going to believe that their values are compromised with too much money. And when they recognize those values are important to them, they're like, oh, no, I don't want to lose that. So if I have to choose between having more money and having my values, of course, I'm going to choose having my values. And thus, this script is basically, this belief is basically saying that you can't have both at the same time. And that's why it's irrational, because two things can be true at one time. You can have a lot of money and you can have your values at the same time. So that brings me to some key things that we want to do in order to combat limiting beliefs. So if you've identified with your clients that they have some of these limiting and irrational beliefs, or some others, because like I said, there are many others out there. But if you've identified that with them, then here are some ways to help combat that or to try to push back a little bit. Or as they say in the ABCDE method, which I haven't really talked about too much today, but the D in there would be to dispute these beliefs. So how do we dispute these things? So the first one is to actually examine the source or the root of those beliefs. We can't dispute something unless we know like where it came from. And I mean, I guess that's not entirely true. We can dispute it. But sometimes it's good to know where that came from because it kind of creates awareness for us. We can know maybe it came from something that happened in our childhood experiences. Maybe we went to some social event and this external thing happened to us and, it started to form that belief for us. I don't know how many of you who are listening today have actually seen the, I think it's Disney, the Disney movie Inside Out or Inside Out 2. And I have a kid. I have 4 children. So I see a lot of kids' movies because of my role as a mom. And what's funny to me is that there are some that I'm like, oh, this is great. And some I'm like, not so good. But with that one, what's been fun for me is that 2 things. One, I love psychology, clearly. And so it's been interesting to see like how does this animated film lay out the psychology of emotions inside each of our heads. And so it's been kind of neat to see what people think. And then the other thing that's been really great about it is it's given me a vocabulary or a framework to use when communicating with my kids. So I think I've told you I have like a 20-year-old, an 18-year-old, and then a 12-year-old and a 5-year-old. She's almost 6. She'll be 6 probably by the time you hear this, actually. So what's been really funny is like when, especially the 5-year-old, right? She has all those emotions built up and doesn't know what to do with them. That's very common, normal for her age. But this has given me a way to kind of talk to her and be like, oh, is anger at the console right now? And she'll kind of get a smile on her face and recognize that her emotions are coming out in a certain way. Anyway, I digress. The reason I share that is because in Inside Out 2, they actually have a scene where they're showing how beliefs are formed. So you'll have something that happens, and then there'll be this consequence or, this activating event, and there is a belief that's formed there. And it's just kind of a neat way to visualize what it is that I'm talking about right now. So anyway, if you can know what that belief is or where it came from, then you might be able to recognize that as an irrational belief and reframe that so that you can dispute it in a way where, like, how do I restate or reframe that belief so that it is a rational one? And then you start to, call yourself out, I guess. Every time you start to have that belief, you can remind yourself, no, that's not actually rational. Here's the rational belief. And that's how you get to dispute it. Another thing you want to do, another key, is to get familiar with your money. I mean, I know that sounds really kind of weird, but you have to know like what your patterns are so that you can make some changes that are constructive for you. If you don't know how you behave with money, you don't know what your habits are, it's going to be really hard to make constructive changes. So get familiar with what it is that you do. And some people say, like, figure out how to manage your money. Right now, I just want you to become familiar with it. So if your clients are trying to figure out, well, what is the best system for managing money? How do I actually get control of this money? I know you're doing a really good job working on that with them. But I also want you to just allow them to become familiar with the way that they interact with money. How do they relate to money? What are some of these beliefs that happen? Because the more they're aware of some of that, then you're actually going to, when you're working with them, you'll be able to more readily identify the spots that are going to give them the biggest bang for their buck, for lack of a better word. Okay. And finally, have them get some education about money. This is where if we continue to learn like how money works, and it could be all of the, investment stuff and just different products that are out there. It could be, how do interest rates work and that kind of thing. The more that they learn and understand how money works itself, then they can realize how do they better interact with that money. And I just want to, bring this thing full circle and say that these kids who, well, their parents are probably the ones who encourage them to join this class, but they're already starting the process of getting educated with how money works and what are some of the things that we need to know about that. And that will just continue to grow them. They'll continue to learn a little bit more, not just about money, but about themselves and how they interact. And maybe, just maybe, they won't have to be your clients 5-10 years from now. Maybe we can keep them from having to do that. But no, all joking aside, I love the fact that each one of you is working with your clients and helping them to become better, even if they did get educated earlier on. And so anyway, that is what I wanted to talk to you about today. I hope that you were able to take some notes and really be able to take this to your clients and start to apply what I've talked about today and help them to just dispute those irrational beliefs and start to actually move forward with creating more rational ones. If you need any help with that, or you have questions, because I know I talked kind of fast today and it was a little bit of a shorter episode. If you have questions about any of that, totally reach out to me. I'd be happy to answer them, any of those questions. You can email us. You can talk to us in the Facebook group. I encourage you, if you have not yet joined that Facebook group, to do so. It is a really great place to just jump in and connect with myself, to connect with Cody, the team at New Money Habits, and some really incredible coaches who are in there and are very interested in helping each one of you to navigate whatever it is that you have going on. So I welcome all of you there. Thank you to each of you who listens. It's been fun to watch some of you every weekers. You like personally call yourselves out in the group. And even the ones who have emailed us and said, I don't think I'm an every weeker, but I tune in often. So it's funny that that's caught on, and we really appreciate each and every one of you, no matter how often you listen. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Hopefully with Cody this time. All right, you guys, have a great rest of your week. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Coaches Podcast, brought to you by New Money Habits and Sizemore Financial Coaching. Submit your questions to our hosts by emailing podcast@newmoneyhabits.com. Be sure to subscribe to be notified of future episodes and join our growing group of like-minded coaches on Facebook. And until next time, happy coaching.